Welcome back, everyone. We are back with a new episode of The Journey Within. I am your host, Andrea Escobar Logreira, spiritual medium and psychic. Each week, we get to connect with different healers, storytellers, and vision holders as they walk us through their journey within dark night of the soul experience, what inspired them to take a more spiritual journey and create light out of darkness. I am so honored to be joined by today's guest. She is the author of The Inside Guide. You started, has been advocating for the cannabis space for a really long time and has really pivoted in a way that I feel like it's almost following her soul's journey in a very fun way. Jazmin Hupp, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Andrea. It's great to be here.
So great to have you. Thank you for sharing your time and energy with us. So grateful. So I want to jump right into like the beginning to like little Jazmin when she was a little tiny baby growing up. How was that? And just kind of take us into growing up, middle school, high school, all of it. I want to know it all.
Oh, just the life story. So I'm a second generation psychedelic hippie, to be truthful about it. My parents were both born to, middle upper class families with really kind of traditional structures, and they rejected all of it in their teens and 20s and met each other in Montana, being rebels. and I'm the first child of that result. My parents have been together, they'll celebrate their 40-year anniversary this year. So another vote for doing your psychedelic work before you get into your marriage, as my parents get to benefit from that, and I get to be a second generation benefit of that. So I was born to hippies in Victoria, British Columbia, because my dad wasn't down with Reagan as a president. So we popped up to Canada for a little while. And I was raised in an RV traveling across the western half of the United States. I went to 13 different grade schools. And when it was time for high school, I went to my parents very studiously and said, we are moving somewhere for high school. And we're going to stay there for 5 years for my sister and my younger sister and I to graduate. And they were like, that seems fair. So we drove up and down I-5 on the West Coast, and we chose Ashland, Oregon as our hometown because I was obsessed with theater, and they had a large regional theater there called the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. And so I got to have, a really beautiful, picturesque kind of high school experience where I'm in Southern Oregon, where there's medical cannabis. And so my experimentation as a 16-year-old was on Friday nights. We would buy a bunch of junk food and we would smoke pot and pass out in the living room. And that's about as exciting as high school got for me. I didn't learn how to drink in high school. I wasn't, cruising the hills or anything. Like, we were in like a hot tub, and the most dangerous thing that ever happened is you dropped the bowl in the hot tub, and then that kind of sucked, right?
There you go.
So I had this really great Southern Oregon kind of upbringing, and then I went to New York City for college. And I got there, and everyone's like, oh, let's smoke pot before class. And I was like, I'm like a Friday night smoke pot and pass out kind of girl. Like, why are we smoking pot before like 7 a.m. drafting? Like, fill me in here. And I start smoking the pot in New York, and it turns out the pot in New York is much less strong than what I'm used to in Southern Oregon. I'm used to medical grade marijuana in Oregon being like a Friday night indica pass out. And this is like New York in the early 2000s. Like, it's just pretty standard. Like, it's college weed.
Yeah. Oh man.
So that's indicative of my college experiences. Like, I was expecting it to be super, super intense, and it wasn't.
You're like, wait.
So you go looking for more intense experiences, right? So I get a full-time job. Actually, what happens is my computer breaks and I really don't want to buy a new one. So I go to work for Apple because I want the discount.
Oh God. I love
And
this. I love
so
this.
this decade of me working in the Apple ecosystem in Manhattan, based off of like one computer purchase, I guess I got sucked in. And that's where I get my, my business management chops, my marketing chops, my entrepreneurial chops. Is I got to be an independent entrepreneur for a company called TechServe in this larger Apple ecosystem, where I'm able to do all this e-commerce and tech and just like, you know, craziness.
Yeah.
So I spent all my 20s like really trying to conquer capitalism. And I'm quite good at it. You know, I get to the 6-figure salary, I get to the Manhattan apartment, and I get through my Saturn return, and then my grandmother dies. And my grandmother dies in her 80s. And both of her mothers, my great grandmothers, had lived to over 100.
Oh, wow.
And it's this moment of like, oh, like something must be wrong in this equation. Like, how could my grandmother, who had, you know, fairly modern medical care all her entire life, die earlier from stress? She died from a stroke. Than her mothers, her mothers were pioneer women in 1900 on the plains of Wyoming. My great grandmother is the first female sheriff of the West. She was the sheriff for Jackson Hole, Wyoming in 1920. Like, these are crazy pioneer women. They had, you know, rough pioneer lives. And here my grandmother is gone. And like, how did we go backwards here? What went wrong in our health and in our culture and in our systems? And so that begins this journey of turning away from straight capitalism and entrepreneurship towards, oh, we've got to give women some unfair advantages. We've got to somehow even this out. We've got to somehow make this easier on moms, make this easier on women in the workforce. And so I start studying, like, what are all the levers we can pull? You know, can we change how businesses are funded? Can we educate people differently? Can we enact new laws? You know, just like looking for everything. And I become a director for an organization called Women 2.0 out of the Bay Area. Okay. And Women 2.0 is organizing female entrepreneurs for tech startups. And basically over 10 years, we go from having like 2% of funding go to women entrepreneurs to like 7% of funding. And it's just like painful, right? It's just like painful to watch. So in 2014, when cannabis is legalized in Washington State and Colorado State for adults, I go to Colorado for the first 420 and see that, oh, there's this new opportunity. We're going to set up cannabis across the country, and maybe we can be really careful about who are the people that are allowed to continue to operate, who are the new people are allowed, where the money comes from, where the money goes. So I become a co-founder in an organization called Women Grow. And that's an organization that organizes women all across the country, and actually in several different countries, to get interested in cannabis and either start businesses or advocate for themselves as patients, whatever, you know, needs to happen in their state. And so through that organization, Women Grow has had about 75,000 women attend events in 60 cities. And yeah, just amazing connections made through that. And yet, very few businesses in cannabis are owned and run by women. So we did all this foundational work, we did all this education, we did all this promotion, all of this PR, and still, like, you know, there's no really solid numbers, but it's maybe 2% or 10% of like cannabis touching businesses are owned by women. So I burned myself out trying to solve that problem and taking it all on myself and making it my job to fix that, and deciding that I had failed since I wasn't able to immediately fix it by myself. And that was an epic invitation to go in for some more self-development. So I passed the reins of Women Grow over to a more diverse team. And that's the team that operates Women Grow today. and really started to take time off to redevelop myself, because I realized that I had maxed out what I was able to do. I had gathered lots of energy, lots of excitement. I bottlenecked too much of it through myself, and I could not hold that level of energy and that level of excitement for myself or for the community. So it was time to go back in and build that strength and build that resilience. And I did that primarily with doing a mega dose of LSD once a week for 2.5 years. And over that process, I lost 50 pounds. I really restructured how I thought about work and self-care. And yeah, my relationships are really different today than they were before taking time to be really investigatory about how I could be in relationships. So that's the long and the short of it.
I have literally so many pivots that I want to go into right now, but I want to ask you, because you had such a unique upbringing and a very, I want to say almost, it was like they were nurturing you for after your breakthrough, when your grandma and all of this, like, if that makes sense. Like, here, all of this, but you probably didn't tap into it until way later. As you said, you kind of got lost into that whole Apple kind of EOS type of thing. How did you, like, Oregon and New York are so different. Even in the early 2000s, they're like so different. That's literally like night and day. It's like light and dark. It's such a different, I almost feel like Oregon, and this is me again putting labels onto things, but Oregon's almost like enlightened, and New York is the shadow that we still need to go through. It's like, oh, look at all the things they keep denying that exist in the world. Like, did you experience that at all?
Yeah, New York was a fascinating playground in my 20s. And I can't live there today.
Yeah.
I have to say that, like, openly, like, once you do all the opening energetic work and you clear out your chakras, and like, being in New York is tough unless you have a really certain lifestyle. And so, yeah, they are night and day. And that was on purpose. I liked the intensity. Okay. I liked the test. I liked the seeing how far I could go, in the most, the most. And now I know I can do it at the top level. I can do it on Madison Avenue. And now I can do it on top of the Rocky Mountains. So it was my training ground, definitely.
Wow. That's so beautiful, the way that you're kind of saying that, because I feel like it's very powerful to be able to recognize that we can resonate with a place or a person or something at some point in our life, and then later on it's just we're not there anymore. And I feel like that's been persistent throughout your journey, at least from an outsider's perspective, because, and that's where I know you from Woman's Grow. Like, that's where you first popped into my radar. And I remember hearing about it, not even directly from you, but just like the space is so, there's not a lot of women in the space. So like, if one person's doing something, everyone knows what's going on, especially in Colorado. And someone was like, oh yeah, I think she's like stepping down. And I'm like, oh, that's sad. Like, I wonder why. But we don't see what's really going on inward. And for you to be able to kind of recognize, I needed to do more work internally so that I could hold this space, so that I could continue to show up, so that I could be of service to the community. It takes a lot. Like a lot of being able to kind of separate yourself from your ego and being able to say, hey, you know what? This is the next chapter, and not getting so attached to that egoic outcome that we all want at some point in our lives. You're like, no, this is what we're supposed to be doing. So I really have to, I commend you on that, and being able to follow your own voice, like follow your own, I feel like your soul's messages throughout this entire time when it can be really hard.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, I almost think like I don't even have a choice as much as it is. It's like I think we're so good at manifesting what's ever in our subconscious so that we have to deal with it in our consciousness. So it's like I don't even feel I had a choice. I feel like it was just like the next step in the process. Like you're just gonna manifest whatever it is you need to develop yourself further. Like there's no like it's not like you go backwards ever. I think that's a big mistake is people feel like, oh, like I'm not going in the right elevator path up the right road, or I don't have the right progress steps to report. And it turns out that progress is very strange looking in its route. So don't worry about it. Just make up something you can tell your uncle that sounds impressive and move on with your life.
No, I think for me and for a lot of people, realizing that growth isn't linear can be such a freeing thing. Because what you're saying is so true. Like we think it's this, and it's not. You have to fall down to get back into where you're going. You can't, like, yeah, that's something that I've even recognized. Like I fully believe we manifested 2020, and I have to be careful with when I say that because not everyone's there yet, but I am very like, no, we needed to wake up. Sadly, we still need to wake up more. We're not there yet. Things are going to continue to happen, but it is, we manifest both the light and the darkness, and it's being able to almost play in that playground of both, of not getting attached to one or the other. I want to talk more about your major dosing with LSD for a long period. It was 2 years, 2.5 years. That's a really long period of time. And I'm going to more off, that's a lot of deep work. Like, you're not like, let me dip my toe in and sort of see what comes up. You're like, no, let me just dive in. Whatever's coming up's coming up. Because I from what I've heard, shadow work and inner child work with LSD is very intense. How was your experience with that?
Well, I would say that the reasons that I did 2.5 years of what I would call like a double dose of LSD, which is 250 mics, is that I really wanted to know that it was safe before I recommended it to other women. When I came into cannabis, I had, over a decade of being a daily cannabis consumer myself. And so it was really clear for me to come into cannabis and be able to recommend this to other people. I simply didn't have that knowledge for psychedelics. And because of our laws, we don't have the studies anymore that would show that this is safe or that this was even a good idea. So because I had time and the ability and the access, LSD is what I chose to do my work with. I think that you can do this work with a lot of different molecules, though, I want to be clear about. And I can also say that you can do this work in a shorter period of time. If I had kind of the structures and the guidelines and integration that I discovered in the path of this 2.5 years at the beginning, I could have maybe done this development in 6 months or a year. All that being said, it was a well-spent 2.5 years.
Well, thank you for being the human guinea pig that we all want in the world. No, seriously, I have so much respect for that. It's almost like, okay, I see a void. No one else is going to do it. Might as well try it myself. I have nothing to lose. So I think that's very... I'm like right now, I want to thank your parents almost and your grandma, because I feel like you said, you were a second generation hippie, and they kind of planted that foundation of explore, do whatever you are kind of feeling called to. And thank you to your grandma. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't at that moment you weren't thanking her, but she kind of escalated the process even more so that you could dive deeper. So thank you to all of them for that. Wow. I like, part of me wishes that you had like a camera like for those 2.5 years. And like, I feel like you might say this like 2 years later, you'd be like, oh, by the way, someone was saying they wanted the footage. Here it is. Like, that'd be really cool. Of just like, you want to see what it's like? Got it documented for you. That'd be awesome. I'm going to pivot into cannabis a little bit. There's something that you talk about in your book that for me was really, it was something that I had already been thinking about, and I had talked about it with certain people, but then when I wanted to bring it up open, everyone would kind of be like, no, this is a conversation we have behind closed doors, not up in public. You talk about legalization and how we're taking something that has been used for hundreds and thousands of years, and there's people that are in jail and are suffering and don't have access to the same things. And I'm going to say it right now, we're both two white women, so I can go ahead and say that, don't have the same privileges that we have because of our skin color. And now that it's legalized in certain states, the people that were using this plant as medicine are not getting anything from it, versus the people that are putting people in jail are now making a profit out of it. And for me, it's a twisted, very twisted kind of way of looking at things, because I'm Hispanic. My last name is Escobar. I grew up, like, my family's from Colombia. It's not like I'm like, I grew up with the, oh, so are you related to Pablo? More than I would like to admit. And if I was feeling particularly sassy, I'd be like, oh yeah, and see how far I could go, and then just be like, this is why you're an ignorant American. Like, did you really just believe what I said right now? Like, seriously? And you don't question anything I'm saying? Like, what? But it hurts me a lot, because what I heard a lot growing up was, well, that's why there's drugs in this country, because your people brought it here. And this is why people die, because your people brought it here. And all of this. And now I kind of want to say, my people brought it here. The stuff my people brought, y'all don't consume. The stuff that you guys do consume, we're not consuming back in Colombia. And now the people that have been using this literally daily and haven't caused issues are in jail, and you get to sit here and collect money while there's still people in jail. And it's a conversation that I feel like is not had enough. It's not talked about enough. I feel like we're borrowing right now something that doesn't belong to us, and it belongs to the planet full on. I can't speak on behalf of something that's made in a lab, but I can speak on something that it literally grows as weeds in the ground. And there's no known deaths around it, yet it blows my mind. There are people literally rotting away in jail because of possession, versus crimes that I think should be prosecuted differently, get 5 years and they're good. You've worked in the industry, you're a woman in the industry. I know you saw a lot of discrimination and a lot of things that you weren't okay with. And you touch a little bit more on this in your book, but I would love to hear your thoughts on all of this, and kind of what message people can take with knowing that, like, that's something I keep in mind every single time I go into a dispensary, and I'm like, there's someone in jail for something that I literally get to do, and a cop can, and I can be like, hey, how's it going? And you can't say anything to me. And I struggle with that guilt sometimes, because I don't want to do it over the table. I want to do it under the table, because I'm like, who am I supporting by going into a dispensary? The systems that continue to lock up people. So I wanted to have that conversation with you and just hear your thoughts. You're like, oh damn.
It's the conversation, right?
Yeah.
We could do so many, and we should do so many shows on this. And I have done so many shows on this, and it's the conversation to have. And it's, it starts with understanding that the war on drugs was actually a war on Black and brown people in this country. And then, of course, extended, to allow us to interfere in many countries like yours. And I think that the truth about those things are kind of like just coming out. Like, we're just getting the documentaries where Americans could understand, that they don't know shit about what actually happened in Colombia, or we don't know a shit about what happened with Eisenhower, just on and on and on. So I'm super happy that that this information is coming to light. And if you follow astrology at all, this is a time in the world where these old power structures are coming to light and are being questioned, and have a chance for us to really change them. This isn't protest for the sake of protest right now. This stuff's gonna change from Thailand to New York City. It's wild right now.
It's a great time to be alive.
We incarnated at this time for a reason.
Oh yeah.
So, and if you happen to incarnate like I did with white skin, it's my responsibility to stand out in front of this and scream from the rooftops that we can't do it this way. And I think the women in New York State are a really good example of women who stood their ground and spent the last 4 years advocating for the marijuana legalization that just went into place. And it's the most equitable of the marijuana legalization we've seen so far. Nothing's perfect, but they had from the beginning, if the first charge that you're in jail for is marijuana, we're going to get you expunged. They had the ability to grow at home. You can have up to 5 pounds of marijuana at home. You can have up to 3 ounces on you. But most importantly for New York, and New York City especially, marijuana is no longer a reason to stop and frisk people or to pull people over. And so, when I talk to my friends, my Black and brown friends in New York, and especially my mom friends, they breathed a huge sigh of relief, because up until just a couple of weeks ago, they could have Child Protective Services called on them at any time just for being a cannabis consumer. And so I see the hope. I see us getting a little better at it every time. I also see that it's a effing disaster, and so many lives have been ruined in this transfer and in this process of trying to get people to understand how to use cannabis and yeah, I think that's what propelled me so hard into psychedelics. Was I saw that, wow, we haven't finished the job in cannabis. We didn't do a great job. I wonder if I can help with the next plant that we bring to the public. I wonder if we can make this a little smoother and a little more equitable and a little more respectful of the folks who've been providing these medicines since before they were illegal, frankly. So that's the challenge, and we all should be pissed. You're right.
I think for me, what's hard is what you just said right then and there. And And that's where I struggle with, because I forget sometimes, and people are like, how can you forget? I'm like, I forget that that my skin is white, not because I don't have privilege. It's not that, but I forget because my grandpa's a hell of a lot darker than me. My aunt is a lot darker than me. I have family members that are Black. So I forget sometimes, because I'm like, I see the injustices there, but then I have to kind of take a step back, and I'm like, but I didn't get those. And the reason I don't get those is literally because of my skin color, because that was what my soul decided to reincarnate in this lifetime. And it breaks my heart that you can do Xanax. And I'm using Xanax because everybody loves to pop Xanax now. It's like the cool thing. But God forbid you smoke weed. Like, that's dangerous. And I want to say, really? What the hell are you going to do to me if you smoke weed? Versus if you're on Xanax and you drink, you can become violent and potentially hurt me. Versus the mom that's smoking weed's not going to do anything to me. So it's really hard to see that more of it is brown and Black women and men getting the stigmatized end of the stick, versus if you are white, you don't get the same stigma right away. Like, if you're a person of color consuming, the automatic assumption is, well, then you're not doing anything. You're this, you're that. If you're a white person consuming, yeah, some people might think that, but it's not going to be as in your face as it is. And that's where I struggle with that, because I kind of want to say, we're using it now. They've been using it all their life. Like, what are we doing? It's this very twisted thing. So I think it's beautiful that you're kind of learning from how we approached cannabis and switching to see how we can come up for a different way with new plants. And I know it's great that in Denver, psilocybin is decriminalized, which I still don't know what that means. Like, okay, like, it's decriminalized, but it's still illegal. So I don't know what's going on there. And then in Oregon, good for them. They decriminalized it too. But again, there's not a lot of information out there. So it's through word of mouth and really connecting with people that we can pass on the knowledge and hopefully provide a space where people feel comfortable exploring on their own. And I feel like that's what you did with your book. You're almost saying, yeah, you can do the white privilege way of going to a retreat space and doing all of this, or you can learn to self-explore and really get to know yourself with the aid of many magical plants that we have. And I love that. I love that because it's empowering, again, the individual, not relying on externals. And that's going back to systems. It's almost breaking down that system and really going back to community and what feels right to you, even if it's not what everyone else says. Like, I laugh growing up, my mom, if I burnt myself, she's like, put honey. And when I was in school, I'd be like, oh yeah, put honey. And people would be like, why? And I'm like, so that your burn mark doesn't stick. And everyone would look at me like, what are you talking about? I'm like, no, it's a thing. Or cinnamon if you're bleeding. Or just, she had very like odd ways. Or I remember, oh God, I hated this. If I was sick, it was olive oil with salt.
Ooh,
Like, if I was
yeah.
coughing, she's like, here. I'm like, oh, I don't want it. Please don't give it to me. Fish oil. She loved the fish oil. So, and these are all things that now people are talking about. And in the mainstream wellness industry, it's coming out. And I'm kind of laughing because I'm like, yeah, my mom's been doing that before it was cool. Actually, I got made fun of for that when I was little. So
Yep.
Cool that you now think this is awesome.
Yep.
What has been your experience with psychedelics and women in that space, because we've had way more. Cannabis has been on the scene a lot longer. I feel like there's way more stigma with psychedelics in general. Like I was talking to someone in Netherlands, and they're like, yeah, you know, we had truffles, they were good, and now we're kind of going backwards in time, and you guys are going forward. So it's this kind of what's going on with the world. And I laugh because it is this very interesting, wow, you guys were doing great, but now you're getting a little fearful. And it's a lot of, there's the recreational use, which I still think everyone's using it medicinally, even if you're aware of it or not. But there's that recreational use. And when you're in that recreational state, you're consuming other substances. So you can't really place blame on one thing. And then when we go on to the more medicinal side, like you said, we don't have research. This isn't something that we can just go and Google and be like, all right, how does it work? How are people doing with, like, it's just not out there. So it is very word of mouth and, you know, who wants to share their experience. How was that for you entering that space?
So we bringing it back to astrology really quickly. We went from the Piscean age to the Aquarian age recently. Mm-hmm. And a way to sum up the Piscean age is I think, therefore I am, right? I think. So it was all, the Piscean was all about gathering knowledge and all about like, how do we create knowledge and how do we transfer that knowledge to other people? Yeah. Very much about studying. We just, in 2012-ish, depending on who you listen to, we transferred into the Aquarian age. We're just getting started. And my motto for the Aquarian age is I am. So by virtue of your experience is what creates you or completes you or is what we're here for. Yeah. We're here to experience right now. Maybe 10 years ago we were here to learn things. Now we're here to experience. And so especially when we're looking at legalizing or decriminalizing new old molecules and our old plant friends, my secret side goal is for as many people as possible to have a direct experience with these molecules and with these plants. Because I think from that direct experience, we'll get the best way to decriminalize them, the best way to legalize them, the best way to do therapy, the best way to sell these things, the best way to commune with these molecules and with these plants is through direct experience. So that's what the whole book's about, is just like 97 pages just to get you as quickly as possible, just like get you started. Just try something, anything. You read the book, it gives you instructions on a couple different options, because there isn't one right protocol, there isn't one right thing, there isn't one right plant, there isn't one type of healing, there isn't one need. You know, you go into some, we'll bring it back to skin color for a second there. You go into some white communities that I speak in, and they're talking about spending 6 to 12 months getting ready to microdose a very small amount of mushrooms to maybe do a full dose of MDMA after maybe 6 months of microdosing. And then I'll go into some of the Black communities that I've spoken in, and their advice is find someone to sit outside the door. They're going to take your keys, they're going to take your guns, and they're going to take your phone, so you can't go anywhere or say anything. You're going to go into the next room, you're going to put a blindfold on, you're going to listen to your favorite music, and you're going to do 5 grams of mushrooms on your first time. And so that's what we're starting with. The starting advice for psilocybin is spend 6 months journaling to get ready for microdosing, or do 5 grams with a sitter. That's the landscape that I'm in. And so instead of telling people, and so my instructions are kind of middle of the road, I would say, is getting people started, not in the safe category, but also maybe not fully in. because these instructions were written for people who are potentially going to be locked down at home alone. So we don't go into like how to have the full crazy, but we get everybody started safely.
I love that you made those very extreme examples because they're very prominent, and it's my first experience with psilocybin was in college, and it was way more than I should have taken at that time. But hey, everything's a learning experience is the way that I view things. And I was already hallucinating as it is without adding any substances to the mix. So when they were added to the mix, I'm pretty sure I scared everyone around me. They're like, what the fuck just happened there? But it was something that I needed. And then I didn't touch it again I for a really long time. And 2 years ago, I felt the call. Like, it was everywhere. It was just popping up everywhere. And kind of going back to where you were saying, it was a really interesting, I would listen to different people's, and I had a lot of my more white privileged friends, you need to prepare and integrate for like 6 months. And I'm like, I don't have 6 months to figure out my inner child shit. Like, this is something I want to work on now, not 6 months from now. What? No. And then on the other hand, I had my more multicultural friends that were like, dude, you're overthinking this. Just do it. And I had a really great friend that literally said, why don't we do this? Let me know, and I will pass by and I will hang with you, take everything, you're good to go. And it was kind of that space. But going back to what you were saying with quarantine lockdown, I had to be very self-aware during that time, because I feel like once you get into the groove of exploring more and more, you're like, oh, I got this. I totally know what's going to happen. And then you have this wake up call where you're humbled and you realize, actually, you know nothing. Let me remind you of that real quick. And it was in that experience that I realized, I finally had to realize, I'm like, it doesn't matter how long you're in my life, how often I consume you, you will always bring whatever lesson you want to bring. It's not what I want, it's what you want to bring. So I love that you're saying that, and giving people the space to explore with what resonates with them. I've been more scared of anything that's made in a lab because of my own history. And it wasn't until I read your book that I started thinking, I'm like, not saying I'm in, but I'm kind of curious now, which before it was just fear. And now it's more of this, like, if the universe wants it to happen, it will happen. So it's kind of nice. I want to go back into astrology a little bit. What is your sun sign, sun and rising? I've been wanting to ask you that since you were talking, because I'm just like, wait, this way.
So I'm a Libra with a Scorpio rising and a Scorpio moon.
That makes so much sense. Wait, do you know what your parents are?
Sure. So my parents are astrologers.
Oh my God. Wait, no, wait.
Yeah. I come from all the hippie arts,
you can't make this shit up.
Yoga, pot, musician, art. I was a strawberry child kid, or strawberry festival kid, you know, all the, you know, I got to practice Burning Man.
That your soul literally picked like a really interesting time to come back.
Yeah, no, this is a reward lifetime or a finale lifetime, they say in my long-term astrology. Like, I really just gotta like design this life to learn some things, and we're having a good time.
Oh man, that's so, I feel though your Libra definitely comes off in trying to kind of like, let me just bring this to everyone. But I see your Scorpio so much now that you said that, it like, no, because you don't, even on your Instagram, like you'll like share like 2 sentences, and those 2 sentences that anyone else would share are like superficial. You're like in 2 sentences, and I'm like, damn, how? Okay, yeah, let me sit with that for a second. Like, it's literally that, where I like laugh, because sometimes I have 2 Instagram accounts. I have one where I go on, and then one where I don't post or anything, but this is so that I can go on when I'm stoned and I don't want to, like, because I've realized sometimes I'll get on Instagram and I'm really high and I'm like, I should not be on here right now. Let me go. Yeah, like, no. This is a conversation to have later if I really still want to. But on this other one, I'll kind of like look at people that inspire me, and you're one of those accounts. And it's amazing because I'll literally be like, wait, share more, Jazmin. No, I want more. And I'm just like, what? Give me more quotes, give me more information. And my friend, I was staying with her for the last month, and one day she just comes to me, she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm trying to get Instagram to give me more inspirational quotes. And she's like, I don't think it works that way. I'm like, no. It's this account. I want to find more about her. But it was this like full on thing. And she's just like, what? I'm like, just read what she just said. And she read it and she's like, I don't get it. I'm like, how do you not get it? And then she's like, what were you just doing an hour before I got home? Like, smoked a joint, maybe had some tea. She's like, what kind of tea? I'm like, some tea to like connect deeper. She's like, so you're not in this plane with us? And I'm like, oh no, I think I'm going there. She's like, that's why Instagram right now is like literally making your world explode, because it's that where I'd be like, but did you read this? Like, isn't this blowing your mind? And people are like, no. I'm like, you're missing. No, read it again. No, I read it again. I'm like, no, you read this, like, and my friends are like, you, and this is a thing where I've realized I'm not on this plane, and I have to constantly remind myself, you're on Earth, you're not on a different planet. Earth. Speak to Earth, like speak Earth, because sometimes I'll say something and people are like, what? I'm like, yeah, no, okay, not all right, not speaking Earth, need to come down to Earth. So I get that from you. I get, like, I feel like you are definitely a Pleiadian in this on this Earth.
I've been accused of that. Yeah.
So, it's one of those things. You lost a lot of weight when in that 2-year journey, like a lot. And you talk about how people that knew you before, and if they saw you afterwards, they would be like, what happened? Do you also think that it also not only it like made it, you were like shedding almost like a protective layer, and that's why you lost the weight? Because that was where I was diving now. I'm like, spirituality, like, let's go there.
So the original title for this book was How to Lose 50 Pounds on LSD.
Wait, if you still have that rough draft, I want to read it because I'm like so intrigued.
So, and I decided I couldn't drop those stories during quarantine. Like, it just wasn't, there's nutritional advice that's really, there's just so many layers to weight loss that, I didn't want my first offering to be this kind of like half-ass advice on weight loss. that's like taken and weight loss is a really desperate, sensitive subject for people. So I wanted to be actually really sensitive how I approach that topic. And so the first book is general knowledge just to get people started. And I will go back to that manuscript about how to lose 50 pounds on LSD, but it's so funny. It almost sounded like you had read the opening of it, because I talk about how that weight was a protective layer. And in my 20s, what it allowed me to do was to work in a super male dominated field and virtually never experience harassment, because I was big. And so like, I wouldn't call myself attractive enough to experience the type of typical harassment that some of the other women in my industry faced. So it was this beautiful protective layer for myself at the time, but of course had all of these health drawbacks. So just more pressure on my immune system, on my more inflammation in my body. I had carpal tunnel syndrome at that time because I didn't have the yoga and the other practices to lower the inflammation in my body. I was on a daily acid reducer for stomach problems when I was that weight. You know, all of those things that, you know, I got through my Saturn return, and I got to my grandmother's death, and you take stock and you're just like, wait a second, I'm supposed to take this pill for the rest of my life? That's the solution here, is like just to screw with and so that's when I got off birth control. I got off of omeprazole, which was for acid related things in the stomach. Because I realized that my body is pretty freaking awesome. And I bet if I figured out how to work my body with the same acuity that I know how to work my mind, I bet my body will take care of me. And that was some of the insight that doing all that LSD led to, was being able to get into communication with my body, being able to trust my body for the first time, getting into like and love with my body. I'm a nudist, so I love bodies. And yeah, that weight loss journey is as much about the emotional and the spiritual side as it is about changing the physicality and what you eat.
That's kind of why I was like, oh man, I would love to lose 50 pounds on LSD, because for me, I very much view weight like it is, and I try to be very mindful of how I say this, coming from someone that has had an eating disorder. I know that it's a very sensitive subject for a lot of people, but the way that you talk about it was such a beautiful way for you to protect yourself. Like, it was your body literally protecting itself. Do you feel like you were living way more in your masculine during that time? And then those 2.5 years, exploring with LSD almost allowed you to feel more comfortable entering that feminine sacred space? And I ask because, that you talk about that corporate world, and that can be very, very masculine. It's not nurturing for the feminine qualities.
Yeah. So I think I mastered, or I conquered my masculine before I even really recognized my feminine. Is something that I would say for my journey, is that, in my teenage years were all about leadership, and which I interpreted as control at that time, unfortunately. So, had that framed. In my 20s, I'm working in tech, and working mostly with men. And so, and the business advice at the time, the books that you would read on the time about like how to be a woman in business, literally taught you how to be a man. Mm-hmm. It was like teaching you how to wear the right pantsuit so you don't distract men with your femininity. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I was originally taught to do business. Mm-hmm. And so when I kind of topped out in that, and then my grandmother died, it was a big invitation to step back and be like, oh, this can't be how we've designed the system. Like, we can do better for each other, right? And that's when I started doing more work and training in the divine feminine, and learning how to receive, and learning how to let other people hold the container for me. And I'm still in that investigation and in that work, and bringing together that, both that inner masculine and the divine feminine in myself, and hopefully seeing that in the world, seeing the masculine and feminine out there in the world come together.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that, because it is, I feel like at least it's changing, which I'm so grateful for. Newer generations are not going to have that experience, but I've been like, last year with everything that happened, I really wanted to dive deeper into books that were written way before and kind of start. And I started to realize, I'm like, we grow, but we grow at this like turtle speed, but things are growing a lot quicker, that the fact that we are not adapting quick enough, it's almost like the world is growing, but the humans inhabiting the world are not, if that makes sense. That's kind of been my perspective on looking at all of this. And for a long time, it was nurture the masculine. You're good with the masculine. This is great. And women lost that connection to their intuition and in their instincts, which if you go back to tribes, that's how you got to the place where we were going to live, because women intuitively were like, oh, this will be perfect. There'll be like all of this. And we've gotten away from that. So the fact that, you know, you're still exploring that and you're open with that is beautiful, because it isn't a journey. You talk about your solar return. Do you know your North Node and South Node? I'm like curious now.
I know my North Node's in Gemini, and the seventh.
Ooh.
Yeah.
All right. This is all like, I see now where this is all. Yeah. You're like, your role is in psychedelics. Like your role is literally, no. It's because if you think about it the way Gemini, Mercury communication, I feel like psychedelics are changing the way we communicate with each other. We communicate with ourselves. We communicate with nature, with the systems that have been in place. It's just switching everything. So it's, wow, that's so beautiful. Oh man, that's amazing. My North Node is in Aquarius. So when you're talking about the Aquarian age, I'm like, girl, I feel you on that. Trust me. It's been a lesson this time around.
Yeah.
So as we kind of end this beautiful time together, what are you currently working on? I know that the book just, your launch, the book, it's coming out, I think the 19th, isn't it?
Yeah, the official launch is April 19th for Bicycle Day, which is the historical discovery of LSD Day, is why we celebrate Bicycle Day on April 19th. It's not just to get one day in before 420, although it feels that way. Next week's my business week of the year.
It'd be the best. It's funny because I have like, I take that week off, and people are like, why do you take that week off? I'm like, oh, I'm celebrating plant medicine that week. They're like, really? And I'm like, yeah, you celebrate your birthday and Christmas. I celebrate this week. What? I'm like, Christmas makes no sense to me. This makes sense to me, but all right. So beautiful. That's dope that you guys are doing that. All right.
So I've got the book's called The Inside Guide. You can find it at www.theinside.guide. If you want to buy it direct from me, or it's also on Amazon if you love Amazon. Come get it direct from me, The Inside Guide. I'm also on Clubhouse. If anybody's on Clubhouse and wants to find me there, as Jazmin Hupp, Hupp as in puppy. I'm on Twitter as Jazmin Hupp. I'm on Facebook and Instagram as Jazmin the Inside Guide. And it's good to hear that like my Instagram is worth reading. So I guess you all are invited to follow me there.
It is. It's so worth reading. This is a question for another day, but I know that you've been working more with like native land and all of that. And I wanted to like dive deep into that, but I was like, that's where I'm like, my Gemini mind can go everywhere. And this is where I go back to, I'm like, I learned so much from your Instagram. Awesome. So definitely I will share that on the notes so that everyone can go. As you all can know, because I was like literally saying, no, do not buy it on Amazon, buy it on her site. Please, Amazon has enough money. He's good. He's fine. Support someone else. I was going to say something and I totally lost my train of thought. Everyone knows where they can find you. And you're playing around, and are you hanging around more in Clubhouse now than Instagram, or is it just like wherever you feel called to that day?
Yeah, I'm still doing everything.
Okay.
I really have enjoyed Clubhouse because I feel like it's given me more opportunities to listen. And with Facebook and with Instagram, I have plenty of opportunities to talk a lot and don't tend to listen as much. And so I feel like creating new relationships on Clubhouse has been more like, meeting somebody at a conference where you can kind of like, create a little bit of moment and like get to know somebody really fast. And so, yeah, if you're on Clubhouse, come find me there. It's fun.
Awesome. Well, I'll definitely let everyone know. Thank you so much for joining us, sharing more of your story with us, talking about your book and all the magical things that you got to experience growing up and in this reincarnation period so far. Can't wait to see what you come up with in the future. Guys, thank you so much for joining us this week. I will see you again next week with another incredible person killing it in the cannabis space, because as you know, we are trying to get more women on this platform so they can share their knowledge and their beautiful experience. So I will see you again next Tuesday. Bye.